in the journey out, when I was getting out, there's a narrative. Different people say, "Oh, well, he left because of this." He left for financial reasons, or he left because he was being sued, or he left because of this. They all have their own ideas of the reasons that I left, um, it was a lot more difficult and it took a lot more time. Like, it was a process for me. It was something that I was going through for years before I could actually make that break and before I could actually get out. And it also financially devastated me. My work, my career, my business, everything was wrapped up in that world.
All right, we are back again with Jeff Schoep. I'm glad I asked you how to say your name. I'm sitting there looking at the spelling, but it's Jeff Schoep. And Jeff has been on the channel before. We had a really great talk about his background and everything. But for the sake of this discussion, Jeff, can you introduce yourself and tell us, what you do and then who you formerly were?
So what I do now is I'm a counter-extremism expert. I help get people out of extremist organizations, gangs, cults. I'm also a public speaker and author. Um, so I go around the country. I go into schools. I talk to kids, anywhere from junior high or sixth grade up to through seniors and college students, and talk with them about bringing together people rather than being divisive or hating other people. And the irony of that is, on my background, I was involved in far right extremism, or neo Nazism to be specific, and was involved in that for 27 years. It started as a childhood fascination, in about the fourth grade, and I kept pursuing that as I got older. And I got involved in what you would call the National Socialist Movement, which is the Nazi Party. And for 27 years, 25 of those years, I was the national leader of the National Socialist Movement, which by the time I left was the largest Nazi organization in the country.
Okay, and why I wanted to bring you on is I feel lately there seems to be, ever since October 7th, 2023, a surprising amount of hate that's coming out. And I understand that there are many people who are very critical of Israel, and the situation in the Middle East is obviously controversial. Fair enough. But the conversation seems to be leading farther to where it's not just criticism of Israel as a country, but it leads all the way into an, I guess, ethnicity of, dare I say, anti-Semitism. And I'm concerned when I see things, and I'm going to share a video clip. I shared it with you before, but I'm hoping we can go through it because, to be honest, I really don't pay attention to a lot of it. It's never been a favorite topic of mine, and I just assumed that it wasn't, that big of a deal. Whatever. Why do I want to dig into this stuff? But when I start seeing my favorite creators or people I know, and I'm going, yeah, I'm kind of concerned about what they're saying. I'm kind of concerned about Winston Churchill was the real villain of World War II. What? I'm okay. Now, you mean Hitler just didn't know what he was getting into, and just was just out of his depth, and oops, I'm kind of going, there's something going on here. And as somebody who studies human behavior and things like that, I'm like, I can sniff a narrative being written or a framing, in my opinion, that is occurring. And I wanted to bring you on because, with all of your experience, you probably know every single narrative, or everything, or just about all the beliefs, all the stories, all the tales, which I'm kind of clueless about. So I'm going to start off with this video, and this is what kind of sent me over the edge. It's with a pretty famous YouTuber, streamer guy, Charlie Kirk. He is a very strong conservative, right winger, MAGA, all of that. And somebody in the audience comes up to him and starts asking him questions. And to be honest with you, I was sort of shocked because I was like, I assumed that there are people who believe this stuff, but this guy's actually saying the quiet parts out loud. And in a twisted way, I sort of respect that he did because I feel like it's airing it out to where we can discuss it. But let's go ahead and look at it for a few and tell me when to stop if you ever need me to stop, and I'll stop at different points as well.
How you doing? Thank you for a comment. First off, I just want to say like one of my core values as a Christian and as a man is standing firm in what you believe in. In 2021, I enlisted into the military. As far as
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. As far as I know, I was the only trainee at Fort Benning, Georgia, to decline the COVID vaccine, even when everyone was trying to force me to take it. I was discharged for it. So I truly believe as a follower of Yah, we are called to stand firm in our beliefs. I think that what you're doing is amazing.
Actually, can we just start there? Yah. I've not. I'm assuming Yah is God. I have not, said the Bible as a kid or whatever, but I always just was God. I never heard of Yah. Is that any kind of particular thing or just pretty common?
Yeah, I picked up on that right away. I mean, typically, and not in all cases, but typically that is the language of what I would call what is called Christian identity. So this is like an anti-Semitic brand of Christianity, and there may be some other mainstream Christian churches that use Yah or Yahweh. That would be God, or Yahshua for Jesus. These are old Hebrew terms from the Bible. Like you might hear that you might hear Yahweh in the synagogue, but you're not typically hearing that term in Christian churches. So I picked up on that immediately when I watched this. He's using the term Yah. I assumed went right to that this might be a Christian identist, and but further into the video, I think that's confirming.
Okay, and saying that I've been around Baptists, Pentecostals, Catholics, and that's why I said I've never really heard Yah used in at least all of the religions that I know, and some of them are very, very fundamentalist. But just that word, I was like, that's interesting. But okay,
Trying to get people to wake up. But here's where I start to kind of question you. You're very for Israel, and I totally understand why from a surface sense, from a biblical sense. But as a Christian man who is about to have a little girl in October, here's my problem. In the Talmud, they talk about sexual intercourse that the little girl is permitted if she is under 3 years of age.
okay. What? I mean, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I've never heard that before. Where does that come from? Have you heard that before?
Yes, I have. That's the rhetoric of the Christian identity movement. I mean, the Christian identists believe that they are the true Israelites spoken about in the Bible. They don't believe that today's Jews are the Israel in the Bible. They believe they are the Israel of the Bible, and that's a white extremist organization. There's also a black extremist organization called the Black Hebrew Israelites that have the same concept, except that in their belief, Jesus was black, and they are the chosen of Israel. So this rhetoric here, where he's speaking about these quotes from the Talmud, which is it goes with the Torah. But it's part of the Jewish religion. I can't speak a lot about that because I'm not Jewish, but I know where these quotes are coming from, and these are Christian identity platitudes right out the gate. He comes with that. So breaking this video down, like he starts off, he says Yah, and then he goes into this old anti-Semitic diatribe. It's very telling as far as I'm concerned that this is a Christian identity adherent.
Now, is that actually written anywhere?
The quote that he's using?
Yeah, is that actually in the Talmud?
Yeah, I don't have a copy of the actual Talmud, but this is one of the things that when I was involved in the movement, especially when you're dealing with Christians, this was something that we used, that quote in particular. And there's other quotes that say, things like that from the Talmud. Have I looked it up? And if I did, it was 30 years ago, so I don't have that information, right in front of me, but I would challenge people to look it up, because a lot of this is hokey, made up stuff that people believe. But when you believe things like that, what that does is it cracks open the gates of anti-Semitism. It cracks open the gates of puts that seed of doubt in their mind. So, from as somebody that was a spewer of this type of propaganda, of this type of hate, knowing that if you plant that seed in someone's head, what that does now, it creates anger and it creates doubt. So if you believe that a group of people, an entire culture of people, believe that uh, raping a child is okay, it puts it in your head that these people are demons, these people are evil, these people should be fought against, and that's cracking open that ancient gate of anti-Semitism.
Okay, so the intent then is you're not you're not planning, or you don't necessarily think you're going to convert somebody. You're just sending a message to them to where they start thinking twice about another culture.
Well, it's plain and simple. It's dehumanization. So once you start dehumanizing somebody and you break down those barriers, that all of a sudden this person isn't just wrong, or you don't just disagree with them, but they're literally the enemy. And to dehumanize someone, it makes it easier to make them an enemy. For example, like with groups like ISIS, where they were beheading people, you would say, how can somebody that's was raised in a good home or anything like that turn out that way? Well, it's because they've dehumanized their enemy. It's okay to do that now, because in their minds, psychologically, it's okay to do that because they're doing the will of God. And Christian identity works in a similar way. The pathways to radicalization, despite the differences in ideologies and things of that nature, they're all very, very similar, whether it's far left, far right, religious extremism, cult indoctrination. These things all, the structure is all very similar, even though the beliefs and the ideological basis are very different.
Wow. All right.
A non-Jew woman and it is legal. And as a Christian, I mean, you look at our government, it's been infiltrated by the Jews. The founders of pornography are Jewish. The founders of transgender movement and the LGBT community are Jewish. That's exactly what was going on in Germany. I'm not excusing what Hitler did, but there's more to it. And so as a Christian, what is your biblical perspective to supporting a group of people that are promoting satanic acts and are excusing satanic behavior?
There's a lot there. First,
What do you think? I have to give Charlie Kirk credit, in my opinion, because he's not interjecting. I mean, there might be an impulse to say, "What? Get this guy out of here! What are you talking about?" I feel like he's being very patient and listening to him. As somebody who works with people like this, do you support the way he is handling the situation?
Charlie Kirk is handling it very professionally, and he's letting him speak, because in human nature, all of us want to be heard. Everybody wants to be heard, and even though the guy is saying things that are way out of proportion, and saying things that are offensive and hateful and dehumanizing, Charlie is listening to him and hearing him out, and then he's going to basically answer his questions from his perspective. And I think that's the way to do it, because if you don't have dialogue in society, you don't have you miss that connection. So on one hand, he could have shut the guy down, grabbed the microphone, took it away, brushed him off, but addressing him directly, and I think is the best way to handle it. So he's doing exactly that.
tell me what the Talmud is.
So the Talmud, I believe, is like a set of rules that it's kind of like our 10 Commandments, but on a bigger sense.
No, it's not that. So
Okay.
The Talmud would be the Federalist Papers to the Constitution. So do you know what the Torah is?
By the way, I like that too, that he's asking the question. I feel like he's trying to establish a baseline of knowledge and trying to say, can we agree on what these certain things are, rather than arguing past each other? And that's something I think we don't do well in society, is a lot of times we're attacking each other's message, but establishing, like, what is this thing that we are going to talk about here first, I think is very wise.
In an art, typically in an argument, a lot of times people are thinking about, this is what I'm going to say next, and they're not really listening, and they're just thinking about, I'm going to win this argument. Oh, I got this. I'm going to shame this guy, or I'm going to smash this down. I'm going to get it out there, and they're not really listening when they're doing that, because they're just thinking about what they want to say next. That's human nature. What he's doing, exactly as you said, is he's asking questions. He's basically setting up the baseline, and this is for a respectful dialogue. And this is the way that you change hearts and minds too. I'm not saying he's going to change this guy's heart and mind in one conversation, but that is one of the processes to initiate these type of things, is to have those like respectful conversations.
And I agree with you. I don't think it'll change this guy's mind in one conversation. But I believe you told me before that you would always appear on any documentary or do anything out there, not to change the interviewer's mind or the presenter's mind, but to get your words out to the world so other minds could receive that message. Would you agree that Charlie Kirk may be doing the exact same thing, where no, he's not changing this guy's mind necessarily, maybe he will, but he's speaking to the world through this guy, saying this message is interesting.
In the sense of, well, he's letting him speak, but that doesn't when you let someone speak and you don't interrupt and you don't interject, it's also establishing respect. And if you don't have respect in a conversation, especially if in a disagreement or a debate, you're not going to change anything. But I think what you're referring to before, like when I was saying I would go on any program, this was to get the propaganda out. So if this guy, for example, that's trying to debate with Charlie Kirk, if he's a Christian identist, he's coming out there to promote Christian identity, to get that word out. So he's not going to change Charlie's mind, but it's a platform, and he's out there and he's speaking to the public. So if he can reach one person or 1,000 people, however many, that's a win for him. So that's why he's getting up there and pushing this narrative.
Well, what I was saying is that Charlie could be using him as a tool in the end to do the reverse, like to answer the narrative that's out there, and push back. But then that leads into another concern that I do want to talk about later, about the quote unquote questioning of platforming people versus not platforming people and free speech, because I'm kind of a free speech guy and I like free speech. But I also can see an argument that if a certain type is the only type that's revealed, you're kind of endorsing a message.
Yeah, the Torah is like the Old Testament, like what
Close,
they
yeah. Genesis,
the
Exodus,
Bible.
Leviticus,
Yeah,
Numbers,
it's
Deuteronomy.
their version of the Bible.
Yeah. Well, that Tanakh is their version. It's actually our version. We have an indecipherable Old Testament. So let me just kind of give you a little bit overview, and then we'll talk about the Talmud. So the Torah is the most holy text in Judaism, which is indistinguishable from that as Christians. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. It's the 5 books of Moses, otherwise known as the Pentateuch. Then there is the Tanakh, which includes, the book of Joshua, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. It also includes Psalms and Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Songs of Solomon, right? So on and so forth. Nehemiah, Jeremiah, Esther's. Okay. So that makes up the Old Testament, or they would call the Tanakh, which is basically Torah, Nephilim, and Kvetchim. Okay. Then there's the Talmud. The Talmud is interpretation of the Torah and of the Tanakh. It is basically rabbis arguing back and forth. I don't know about those specific verses. People that are in Orthodox Judaism say that that is not true. I don't know. They'll have to refute and respond to that. I'm not a master of the Talmud. I do know the Torah very, very well. And I can tell you right now, nowhere in the Torah does it say anything that you just described or articulated. So you asked the question, why should we care about Jews? And I will address the other specific points. We are called to bless the Jews as Christians. In fact, you are a Christian, right?
I am, but
what religion was Jesus?
He was Hebrew. He was not the modern.
He was Jewish.
He was not Jewish. He was Hebrew.
Well, hold on. He was from Judea, wasn't he?
Correct, but Jews didn't exist at that time.
Well, hold on.
The modern Jews are not the true chosen people of Yah. They create.
All right. This must feel familiar to you, and that's
yes.
Part.
And I have to be honest with you, I only watched it to just before this part, so I'm hearing more things now that confirm what I had originally said was the this is Christian identity talk. Absolutely, 100%.
created their
Yeah.
own country in the 1940s. They established this is their doctrine, the Yebahamath 11b, sexual intercourse with a little girl is permitted if she is 3 years of age. Charlie, as a
Yeah.
man of Yah,
Again,
how can you justify and
I
defend a group
don't
of
justify
people,
that. That's disgusting. But I
but
will
you're
say,
supporting them?
no. Time out. I will say though that I've never met a single Jew that believes that or understands it. I encourage you to find a rabbi and confront him with that.
They have
Talmudic
videos all over
verse.
the internet.
No, yeah,
It's
it's
not
just
a
nothing.
secret.
Nothing false is ever on the internet, right? But I encourage you.
It's live interviews.
No, I encourage you to go to a rabbi and ask him that very specific question.
I feel like if that was out there, I would have seen it by now. No, I was just thinking, with as many people who don't like the Jews, I guess, I swear it would have come across my timeline at some point. Those many quotes he said of the rabbis saying this. I mean, I'm sure that Candace Owens would put it out there.
Yeah, and I mean this language, I mean, this is the same belief system that I had. You know, these are the same things that I believed when I was involved in the movement and truly believed that. So I mean, this is a dehumanizing aspect, and I'll tell you straight out, and I'll tell anybody that asks. When I first left the movement, and I came into contact with the Jewish community, these were questions that I asked Jewish people. These were questions that I asked, rabbis, that I asked people in the Jewish community, from various aspects of the religion, whether they were Orthodox, ultra Orthodox, Hasidic. I mean, I was able to ask those questions and hear their answers, from them. So that was really important. And I think if those
How did
questions
they
would have
react?
been,
Sorry to interrupt. How did they react to
well,
the
I mean,
question?
knowing my background, it was interesting because it was like, can I ask these questions? Should I ask these questions? But, I have this inquiring mind. I want to know. So I said, this might be offensive. Can I ask this question? Yes, of course, please. And a lot of Jewish people will, if in my experience, if you ask that way and you want to hear about the religion, they'll share these things with you, and they have answers for that. I don't want to answer those questions because I'm not Jewish, but they have answers to these questions, and it set my mind at ease when I was going through that process and learning about it. So I like the way he's addressing it, and he's trying to answer these questions and tackle them with this guy directly instead of just shutting him down.
Yeah, he seems to have a lot of knowledge too of the different books and how they. That's way more than I know. He's rattling off every book that's in this part and this part and this part, and it's like, oh, Charlie's been studying up here. He
Right.
seems to know this stuff. But yeah, I mean that whole thing there too, that Jesus was not a Jew. Then what was he? I mean, that's extremely confusing. From what I understand, most religions would say that Jesus not only was a Jew, but was a rabbi.
The Bible's written in parables, so this is what has caused all these different factions of Christianity, and same with different factions of Judaism. You have different factions of different religions, and it's because it's written in parables. It can be interpreted in different ways. So in the Christian identity faith, they believe that the white race is the only race that can show blood in the face, that can blush. So they'll say Jews can't blush, other races can't blush. This means that we are in their view, that they are the children of Israel because they can blush, they can show blood in the face. And
I
I'm
know
not
Jews
sure.
who blush.
Of
I'm
course they
confused.
can. Yeah, of course. But they don't believe that, so there's that. And then, for example, the Black Hebrew Israelites, there's a line in the Bible that had said something about Jesus having dark skin and woolly hair or something to that nature, or that interpreted in the parables, in the translations. And some of this stuff gets lost in translation too. So in their belief, that says, who is the only race that has woolly hair? Black people have woolly hair. This is their interpretation of it. So Jesus is black. So see, this is where the identists and the Hebrew Israelites change things to fit that narrative, and they believe it. I'm not saying they're just saying this to be anti-Semitic. They truly believe it.
Wow. What happens when you get them together for a discussion?
It doesn't happen very often, but it would be a back and forth argument. When I was in the movement, I was arguing Christian identity stuff with Black Hebrew Israelites when I first met them, and went back and forth. No, you're wrong, and this is why, and who, quoting scripture and all this kind of thing. So it's just the way it's the way it's interpreted, and then it becomes a form of radicalization, and it can stay there in that echo chamber, or it can lead other dangerous places. It just depends on the individual.
But let me ask you, when it says very clearly, when Paul says that we should bless the keepers of the law, which is the Hebrews, do you believe that?
I do.
Okay, so
The
we should.
modern day Jews are not the original
Okay,
Hebrews.
So let me help me understand that. So do you mean the Ashkenazi Jews, or do you mean the Sephardic Jews? Because there are two. Do you know the difference between an Ashkenazi and a Sephardic Jew?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so that's very important.
You didn't see all the way to this point, but I really appreciated that Charlie Kirk was asking this about Ashkenazi and Sephardic, which I think is very, very critical. I'm going to let it play a little bit more, but the guy appears does not know about the two. Was that something that you didn't study or didn't realize at the time, or just not acknowledged?
It is mentioned. Some identity preachers will mention those different things, but in their view, it doesn't really matter. So it doesn't matter if someone's Ashkenazi or what sect they're from. They see them as all the same. So it doesn't matter that they're of different sects, or they do things different ways, or the different ethnic backgrounds. To them, it does. If they are of Jewish blood, even if they're not of the Jewish faith, if they're of the Jewish blood, you still don't affiliate with them, and you want to be separated from them.
So what you're probably talking about is the Ashkenazi Jews. Ashkenazi Jews are Eastern Europeans that came into the region in the 1940s,
Modern
and they
day
are
Israel.
Jewish.
They founded Israel. Correct?
However, but tell me what a Sephardic Jew is. A Sephardic Jew are people that never left the region. They tend to be Persian. They tend to be somewhat.
I'm Persian, half Persian. I'm
Okay,
Irish Persian.
fair enough. But so Sephardic Jews are actually biologically indistinguishable than the original people of Israel 4,000 years ago. So not exactly sure where we're driving that.
Because that's the modern day Israel government. That's who Trump works with.
Well, no, it's actually both. It's both Ashkenazi and
It's
Sephardic.
not.
Well, no, again, if you've ever been to Israel, you could tell the difference in an Ashkenazi and a Sephardic immediately. The Sephardics are like screaming about like going to, go to war, and the Ashkenazis are, having a much more liberal Orthodox Shabbat service. But let me ask you a question. You say that
Now, right there when he said it's not, I feel like he felt his argument slipping a little bit at that point. I do body language stuff, but do you feel that Charlie Kirk may have gotten a slight inroad there, just a slight seed?
Yeah, you could see the other guy, getting uncomfortable just kind of by the way he's, moving his shoulders and his arms, and because he's going into an area that Charlie Kirk is obviously much more well versed than he is, and has a better understanding of this. So now he doesn't have it. His argument's basically falling apart in some ways, and he's trying to grasp at straws and just say no, 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 and he knows it in his mind that he's slipping. Usually in these scenarios, someone's not going to admit they're losing the argument or something, but these can cause seeds of doubt, and that's exactly what Charlie is doing here. Is he's refuting this guy's claims, and hopefully at some point, if the guy's reflective, he's going to go home and research this stuff and maybe start changing his worldview at some point.
Okay, now when you were leading the organization and whatnot, did you internally in the organization train for this kind of thing, for debating and discussing in public? Was there methodology and how to respond to a Charlie Kirk or somebody else?
Yeah, there was only within the organization that I was involved in, there was only a handful of people that were public spokespeople. That if you were doing interviews with the press or anything like that, there was certain people that were that were cleared to do that. So certain people in the officer corps, you didn't just let any member go and speak with the press, because in early days when we had done that, there was people that would go and spew racial epithets. Or would say things that weren't in line with the public face of the organization. So there was only a certain number of people that we had that were able to do that, and we didn't have like actual like debate training or things like that. But they knew that, we had taught them basically that you don't say these things, you don't curse on air, you don't say racial epithets, spew the platforms, and keep in line with those things. So yeah, there was a bunch of rules, but they weren't like written down or anything. It was just like, this is the way you handle things. Stay within the party line. We're not a racist organization was the claim, even though it was. A lot of things basically to try to reach greater segments of the public.
Okay, and that's I'll throw a term out there. Race realism. Is that one of the terms that you use to say no, it's not, we're not racist, this is race realism? Was that part of the vocabulary to present it in a manner that could be more digestible?
That's a more modern term. That's not one specifically that I used, but if people called us racists or something like that, I would say, I'm not a racist. I prefer the term racialist. So that was the way it was spun by the group I was in. But you do have some of these white supremacist groups that will openly say they're racist, but I found that was kind of the minority in that world. A lot of them personally don't identify with that, even though, of course, what they're saying is racist. They don't like being called racist, but it really depends on the individual and sometimes the organization as well. But typically, that's not a good public-facing image. So they'll say things like racialist or separatist. Some will say, that they white separatists, black separatists, so on and so forth, that they want to be separated, that it's not about hate or racism.
Okay, and I just didn't know if there was other code words or things like that we could look to and say, oh, there we go.
I mean, racialist, race realist, could fall into that category. It just depends how they want to spin it. There's different terms coming all the time, but separatist and racialist were the main ones that I had utilized, and the group I was in utilized back in those days.
The Jews run our government. Fair enough. You said that?
Yes.
If that's true, why is it we send so much money to Hamas and Iran?
Because Israel created Hamas.
Okay, wait, help me understand this. So the Jews run our government, is
Correct.
what you say.
Correct.
And
Trump met with the Sanhedrin a few years ago, and they asked him to uphold the Noahide laws, which talk about killing Christians.
Well,
have you heard about that?
Yeah, that's another thing that they teach in Christian identity, and I don't have a lot of background on that one right off the top of my head. It's been a few years, but that's another term that they use. It's another term to villainize Judaism.
So Noahide laws. What is that exactly? Is that similar to like caliphate, but applied to Judaism? Or I'm curious.
It is, like I said, it's been a while. I don't have the exact definition in front of me on that, but it is something that they believe that Jews are doing to the world. Basically, I don't want to comment on that because I have to look it up. It's been a long time since I looked into the Noahide laws.
The Noahide laws are actually, we live under the Noahic covenant, and nowhere does it say it should kill Christians. What are you talking about?
The Noahide laws are the upholding of so Trump works for the Jews.
Tell me what the Noahide laws are.
The Noahide laws is a group of laws that the Jews live by that specifically say that they have guillotines. It talks about the beheading of the it starts with the G. I forget the exact word they used to describe what they would say Gentiles. They have a word noyim or something.
Goy, which means nation. Correct. In Israel. Do you know that? Okay. So anyone who is not a Jew is called a goy. Goy literally means,
they all deserve to die is what they say.
So let me just make sure I understand. So Jesus Christ, who himself was a Hebraic, Torah observant, Shabbat observant Jew, or whatever you want to call it, right? Because Jew just means you're from Judea. That's all it means, okay? You know that, right?
No.
That's where it comes from. Tribe of Judah, then formed Judea.
No, I just said no. I'm confused. Is this getting into the actual identity problem, that if he acknowledges that Jew is from Judea, then it all falls apart. Why is he not acknowledging just that very basic point?
What do you mean, the other guy or Charlie Kirk?
The other guy.
Yes, because his argument's going to fall apart. And I like how Charlie's handling this here. You know, when he's talking about goyim and goy, this was a word that's very heavily used, not just in Christian identity, but in the movement. It's another way to demonize Jews and to spread anti-Semitism. They believe goy or goyim means human cattle. I was totally of that belief system as well. And whenever I've asked that to Jewish people, you know, they laugh and they're like, what? Is that really what the movement believed, that we think other races and other people are human cattle? No, that's not what it means. It means nation. It just means, or someone that doesn't believe in Judaism. You know, so these are things that have been twisted to make people feel like they're the ones being dehumanized. So like from the viewpoint of like people that are involved in these type of extremism, for a lot of us from the outside looking in, they think, oh, these guys are on the offensive. They want to oppress everybody. They hate everybody. But in their minds, they're on the defensive. They're just defending their people. They're just defending their race. So that's the mindset. And when you get in that mindset, you know, you can be radicalized to do terrible things because you feel like your people are under threat. You're under fire. And I certainly felt that way. And that's what keeps people going in that in those movements. Same with ISIS, Al Qaeda, you name it. All these groups fit into that category where they feel like they're on the defense and their belief systems are under attack.
Could some of this be stemming from, and I may be saying the word wrong, but I think it's called Shabbos Goy, or a term for some very strongly observant Jews believe you can't do certain things on the Sabbath, and they hire non-Jewish people to do that, and the nickname is Shabbos Goy. Could that be where they get this weird interpretation of using quote unquote non-Jews, I guess? Could that be?
It is. That is one of the things. And I've asked that exact question. I have a very good answer for that as well. A Shabbos Goy is somebody that comes in and, like you said, basically on Shabbat, they do the things that Jewish people are not allowed to do. And I'm very familiar with this because, like, it could be turning on lights or running a dishwasher or a microwave or something like that. You're not allowed to do those things on Shabbat if you're an observant of the Jewish faith. So you have to. A lot of times they'll leave the lights on, you know. But Shabbos Goy, or somebody that would come in, or a friend or somebody that's there that's not observant, could do those things. But the Jewish individual is not supposed to do those things. It's supposed to be the day of rest.
Okay. So and on the Sabbath, they live almost like Amish, I'm guessing.
Yes, yeah. So it usually goes from like Friday. I don't really understand
sundown. I think it's sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday.
Yes. So the hours switch because it goes with the sun or something like that. But yeah, it goes from Friday at sundown to Saturday early evening. It's basically how that works. So it's one day of rest, and you're just not allowed to like watch TV or do certain things. And I guess in a way it is a little bit like Amish, but not quite as restrictive.
Jew comes from Judea. Jesus Christ himself honored the law. Does that mean anything to you?
It does. So if we're going to say Jesus honored the law, how is justifying
and the keepers of the law
of a child under 3 years old?
That's not the Talmud is not the law.
That is what they preach in Israel. They preach in their schools. They talk about it openly.
I encourage you to find me a singular instance of somebody in Israel talking about the legitimate raping of 3-year-olds. That doesn't exist.
Look at our government in Hollywood, who's run by Jews. The sex trafficking. The Jews run the sex trafficking. There itself, Charlie.
Hold on.
Donald Trump himself.
But it's easy to say they run the Jews. Oh, the Jews run everything. If the Jews run everything, why is there so much anti-Semitism?
Because anti-Semitism is a construct created by the New World Order agenda that is being pushed onto us.
You know, so at Jews, it's kind of like global warming. And your theory is very similar to global warming. If it gets warmer, It's global warming. If it gets cooler, it's global warming. If there's anti-Semitism, it's the Jews. If there's no anti-Semitism, it's the Jews. We send money to Hamas, it's the Jews. We send money to Israel, it's the Jews. So at some point, you have to tell me, like, they basically control everything, whether it hurts them or it helps them. Is that correct?
Israel wants the New World Order. They're the synagogue of Satan. It says so in Revelation.
Is what Charlie Kirk stated pretty on point?
He's really on point, and he's picking apart this guy's arguments. But this is something that I've explained as well. Once I got out of the movement, I made this reference, like, you could spill a glass of water and it would be the Jews. Now, it's not quite that bad, but that's a good example of basically what Charlie Kirk just picked apart here, is that it's always the Jews. Now, I had been in arguments like that where somebody would say things like this, not quite as articulate, but where they would say, well, it seems like you're blaming the Jews for everything. Aren't they involved in the right and the left and things like that? And my answer at that time was always, well, it's just Jews playing both sides. It's just the same side of the Jewish coin, right, left, whatever. They're playing both sides to control everything. So that's the mindset. That's how they break it down, is to deflect on that argument. So I wouldn't be surprised if he tries that one, or if he just doubles down. Maybe he's just going to double down and keeps denying it and say, well, the Jews are behind this, they're behind that. But really, if you break down these arguments, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you point it out. But to the radicalized individual that's entrapped in that mindset, it's all consuming and it makes total sense.
Can we step back for a second? And because since you were taught one thing while you were involved with this group, or you learned one thing, and then since then, I feel like you've done a lot of studying and a lot of history and probably a lot of discovery. What started all of this? I mean, that, from what I understand, it maybe all stems from being a middleman culture, as Thomas Sowell described Jews and Armenians and others that, and I may be butchering, so correct me if I'm wrong, that way back in the day, both Christians and Islam were not allowed to lend money, at least with interest, but Jews didn't have a problem with that, so they became the quote money lenders. And they weren't allowed to have property in a lot of these countries, so they became merchants, and they were despised because if they were buying, let's say, a crop from a farmer, they would have to mark up the crop so they could get their cut, and then they would sell it. So then the farmer would say that cheap person did not give me the full value for this crop that I worked hard for. I tilled the soil, and they're just cheapening, they're cheaping out and buying it for very little. And then the person who's buying the product is saying, oh, that greedy person is marking up that poor farmer's stuff and just taking my money and overcharging it. Is that where all this started, or what have you found out?
Well, I mean, some of the, any stereotypes and things like that, sometimes they're based in slivers of the truth, and then they're manipulated in different ways. And as you mentioned, basically, Jewish people were banned from doing a lot of things in different cultures. So they ended up going into banking and merchant trades and things like that. They weren't allowed in certain countries to have certain roles in society and things like that. So they got good in these other aspects of society, and a lot of them did go into those trades specifically. But that doesn't mean that they're all out doing these terrible things. It's twisted. That narrative is twisted, and it's tragic, really.
Charlie.
You
The
think
synagogue
Israel
of
is
Satan.
the synagogue
The
of
synagogue
Satan?
of Satan.
Okay, actually, it doesn't say that.
In the Bible, it says that there will be a group of people who call themselves the chosen people of Yah, but they are the synagogue of Satan. Charlie, we live in the end times. Trump works for the...
I can't agree with that. So let me ask you, since you believe we live in the end times, what do you think? Do you think the modern creation of Israel is fulfillment of biblical prophecy?
It is not.
Okay, then we disagree. Then what do you think it is?
It is a satanic agenda to push a new world order. That's why they were fought in the 1940s. World War II was fought not over what everyone thought it was fought of. Every war is fought by, it is funded by the rich, the Rockefellers, all the rich, the Rothschilds.
Okay, so yeah, let me ask you a question.
They funded all those wars.
Was Hitler bad?
I don't think, I think Hitler was bad, yes. Hitler was bad, yes. But
did the Holocaust happen?
The Holocaust did happen.
How many people died?
Not 6 million.
How many?
It was not 6 million.
How many?
I don't have an exact number, Charlie. I don't have an exact number. It wasn't.
Okay, but
6
you said
million.
it's not 6 million. You must have an alternative. How do you know it's not 6 million?
Because there wasn't even 6 million Jews in Germany.
Okay, well, I mean, you tell me. You're the expert. How many people died?
Charlie, what books were they burning? What books were they burning? The Talmud.
Well,
they kicked a Rothschild out of the.
I heard an interview, Eric Weinstein, and he was talking about that, and he said that was actually a sign. He said when they start going into the number of people who died during the Holocaust, he said that, I forgot how he put it. He said, obviously, it was not 6 million because that's an exact number. And you cannot say that it was 6,000,000 all the way down the line. But it's what kind of mindset is starting to quibble about a number like that? Is that something that was taught or worked at? And I guess the counterpoint is, what if it was 600,000? Was it okay then? What if it was 2 million? What if 4 million? It seems to be a very odd argument.
Well, it's the first kernels of like Holocaust revisionism and Holocaust denial, and I say that from experience. I was a Holocaust denier. I was one of the people that was caught up on the numbers. A lot of the people that I've worked with, bringing them out of that environment, it's something that they struggle with. It's the numbers for whatever reason. It's like, well, that is a sticking point for a lot of people, because that's one of the things the Holocaust revisionists had broken down, and were saying, this isn't right, well, back then they didn't have the records that they do now, and also there was so many people dying in the war and being killed and exterminated. They just didn't have the records. So this is a loose interpretation where they say, well, maybe it was 6 million, but what if it was 6 million 300,021? Like, nobody knows that exact number, but these guys get hung up on that because it plants that sliver of doubt. And as somebody that's if one is trying to indoctrinate somebody or get someone to change their beliefs, if they can get that sliver of doubt in there and get that kernel of doubt in there and say, and I'm just thinking back even to my own radicalization when I started looking into this, because in school growing up, I was taught the Holocaust was real, that it happened. All of a sudden, I'm ingesting Holocaust revisionist materials, and I'm doubting things. And and in my mind, it's like, okay, if they're lying about this, they're probably lying about something else, and they're probably lying about everything. And now all of a sudden, I'm radicalized into that mindset, and I saw it happen time and time and time again. And it happens constantly with people. If they're implanted that seed of doubt, all of a sudden their mind can be shaped into a different direction.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I'm going to use that as a segue, into, you've mentioned, we've talked before, and I think you're familiar with Tucker Carlson. And the guy that we just saw, I think almost anybody would say, yeah, that's some strong language, pretty anti-Semitic or whatever. I mean, extremely questionable at a minimum. I want to play parts of an interview that Tucker Carlson did, which I'm going to say that almost bothers me a little bit more, because I feel like it's potentially shaping the narrative in a far more subtle way, if you will. If you look at this tweet itself, where Tucker Carlson posted the interview, this is how he describes Daryl Cooper. Daryl Cooper may be the best and most honest popular historian in the United States. His latest project is the most forbidden of all, trying to understand World War II. Best and most honest popular historian. I mean, he just said this is an expert. This is, have you heard of any more praise heaped upon somebody as a historian? Can't get much higher than that, in my opinion.
Right.
And people can go through and look at this on their own if they want to say, oh, there's more context or whatever. I will admit that this is picked out of here. But these are some of the messages that Daryl was saying.
I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. But I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland.
Okay, so right there, that's an interesting thing, because I feel like we're lessening Hitler's role, right? He's no longer the chief villain. And he could argue, I didn't say he's a good guy, but he wasn't the chief villain.
It's shifting the blame and trying to shift the narrative here. And I'm not familiar with this guy, but this is a very interesting and odd take on World War II, certainly.
Okay, and now we're going to shift to the second part.
Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler's chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth, that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You have like letters as early as July, August 1941 from commandants of these makeshift camps that they're setting up for these millions of people who are surrendering or people they're rounding up. And so it's 2 months after, a month or two after Barbarossa was launched. And they're writing back to the high command in Berlin saying, we can't feed these people. We don't have the food to feed these people. And one of them actually says, rather than wait for them all to slowly starve this winter, wouldn't it be more humane to just finish them off quickly now?
Do you see the problem that I have with this narrative? One, I didn't hear him say the word Jewish people or Jews. I didn't say rounding up, but it feels so clinical. What he's saying, it was just I think it was called Andersonville. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Civil War, but I feel like he's saying, oh, no. It was really kind of like Andersonville, where, they just didn't have the money, and they were having bad times, and the people themselves were starving. So, those POWs, yeah, it was really bad conditions and bad things happened. And he's not acknowledging any of the master plan documentation, any of the other stuff. Have you seen anything like that? Or is that something that you might have done back in the day, or your group might have done?
Well, what I'm curious about, and maybe there's we're missing some context on it, but I didn't get that he was necessarily talking specifically about the Jews, but he was talking about like prisoners of war from over there as well. That was unclear to me in the clip. Was he talking about Jewish civilians that were picked up, or is he talking about POWs, or is he talking about both? Because that wasn't really clear to me in that clip. So I feel like maybe there's more context, or maybe I missed something in that clip.
I have to pull the whole interview, and I may do more on that, because you bring up a valid point, and I want to put it out there, but it did feel like it could be minimizing, especially when he did not mention that, and he said rounding up. I mean, I'm like, who are you rounding up?
Right. Yeah, it is the context, and he's inserting words there that leave a lot to be desired, because and it's definitely desensitizing, because we're talking about human beings here. We're not just talking about like freight train cargo. These are human beings we're talking about, and it's a very callous kind of way of looking at it, and it is a narrative that is often talked about in the movement. I mean, it's something that I had said countless times, when confronted with like, well, why were all the people that were liberated from the concentration camps so skinny? And my automatic response was, well, what are you going to do when your people are starving? You're going to feed your soldiers, you're going to feed your enemies in the camp. That was my narrative. That's the narrative that I spread. So this does, if we're breaking that down psychologically, it does kind of come into that, does kind of cross paths there, because once again, he's saying, um, I don't want to misquote now, but he basically said something about it was more humane to get rid of these people than to put them in camps. If I heard that right, is that what he said?
That's what he said, and that's where because, and I freely admit, I said it early on, he never said the word Jew, but I don't know who else they were talking about executing, and who else was I mean, homosexuals, I believe, had problems. I think they called them gypsies. I don't know what the term now, that's considered offensive, but they also didn't have a good time of it. And communists, I believe, also were rounded up. So it was not
Yes.
only Jewish people, but the far largest number, from what I understand in history, was definitely.
Yeah, so they had Jewish people, homosexuals, Jehovah Witnesses, actually, and other people that were far left people, enemies of the state, and uh, yeah, there was different groups of people that were rounded up, so to speak.
Undesirables, I guess.
Right, right.
Well, let's go ahead and play the sound again.
Of Poland, Germany. Look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it. That when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war.
Well, the fact you said millions and millions already, it has to include Jews, right? Because there were
Well,
millions of prisoners.
right. Well, I don't know the number of how many POWs they had. There was a lot on both sides, so I'm not sure of the numbers. But he's saying millions and millions. I think that would have to include the Jewish people.
Right, and then we'll continue, because he said prisoners and
local political prisoners and so forth that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You have like letters.
Ended up dead there. It's so sanitizing. I'm sorry. It's like they just went in camp and oops.
Yeah, it's very callous. It's very callous and a way of explaining it. Yeah.
So I mean, again, he didn't say that, but let me back up again. I'm just
and Adolf Hitler is chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it. That when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth, that they were going to.
I think it's the so forth that we're talking about. Local political prisoners and so forth. So
insert Jews here is what I'm hearing. Yeah. Yeah,
either
that's
that, or I guess a Jew could be a political prisoner. Maybe. No, I think there's so
that's
forth.
a stretch. That's a stretch.
I think that would be the communists. Probably.
Yeah, that would probably be the communists. Yeah, that would be your political prisoners, because I don't think the Jews would fall into that category. That's different. So that would be the so forth. Yep.
Yeah, and because he said millions and millions, and he said distinctly prisoners of war, political, local, and so forth, I'm going to say yes, he is in fact talking about all of this, because we just have to get to the number there. But I'm really glad you pointed out. I want to be extremely careful, because everybody keeps saying he's being taken out of context. He's been taken out of context. It's like, I don't know how else to look at that context other than to say it sounds to me like he's describing Andersonville, and just sort of overlooking, which I feel is definitive documentation. No other group literally wrote plans on mass killings like that I know of. That was very, very remarkable. A lot of record keeping of activities.
Yeah, the Germans were meticulous record keepers, so there was a lot of evidence that came out on this stuff.
So, well, it's a dark subject. Really quickly, I want to make sure we can talk about your book. You have a book coming out, and I'm hoping you can, tell us what it's about, where people can get it. It's not out yet, right? It's coming out.
It'll be out June 24th is the release date, and it's a memoir. It's called American Nazi: From Hate to Humanity, and basically it's my life story. It starts out in the younger years and what led to my fascination with neo-Nazism and Nazism, and that a family connection. My grandfather and great uncles fought in the Third Reich, and I'm the son of a German immigrant, and um, that fascination, even though my family wasn't for what I was doing, that fascination sort of propelled me into that movement. I have to take a responsibility for myself that it was my own fault. No one indoctrinated me or made me go down that path. But basically, the book is it's not just a recounting of old horrors of the things that I went through, but it basically psychologically breaks down some of the things that took place, why I did some of the things I did, and then ultimately there's a redemptive arc. It's not all a retelling of old horrors. There's a redemptive arc of where I started the shift. It started changing the way I was thinking, and how that how what led to that, and how I came through that, and then going out the other side and coming into peace building and counter extremism work, and the important and wonderful things I'm doing today to help humanity. So going from a position of hating people to embracing humanity and trying to help others. So that's the short version of what's going on with the book. But thank you for asking, and I'm it's been in the works for several years, and it's finally coming out, and it'll be an international release.
Will it be an audiobook, please?
Yes, yes. I don't have a date for sure on that, but I did audio recording myself,
Okay.
and the forward to it was done by Daryl Davis,
Oh,
who's
nice.
yes. So he read the forward on the audiobook, and I did the rest of the reading. So that's finished. I'm not sure on the exact date on that, but that's in the works as well. So
Daryl Davis is kind of a hero of mine. I really hope to get him on the channel at some point. I think he's done incredible work.
I'd be
Yeah,
happy to connect you. He's like family to me. He's my brother.
that yeah, that would be amazing. Now, I always like to, when I wrap up, ask one question, and it's essentially one of two questions, but it is a, what is it that I neglected to ask you that I should have, or if is there a question that you've been waiting for somebody to ask you in all the interviews that you've done? You just wish, hey, somebody asked me this question because I really want to get that out.
I would say, I guess, one of the things that people don't ask me a lot about is, you know, in the journey out, when I was getting out, there's a narrative. Different people say, "Oh, well, he left because of this." He left for financial reasons, or he left because he was being sued, or he left because of this. They all have their own ideas of the reasons that I left, and um, it was a lot more difficult and it took a lot more time. Like, it was a process for me. It was something that I was going through for years before I could actually make that break, and before I could actually get out. And it also financially devastated me. My work, my career, my business, everything was wrapped up in that world. And the reason I bring this up is not to talk about myself, but because I went through those struggles, and I came out the other side, and I was able to repurpose my life and do something meaningful, coming from that darkness. If I can do that, anybody can make that change. So the reason why I wanted to say that and bring that up is because if someone like me can go through that, and even with all of those things, with that negative background, with 25 plus years involved in extremist politics, neo-Nazi politics, and can go and have a second chance at life, that's one of the best things about America, is that we believe in second chances, that people can be redeemed. There is redemption out there. There is hope. There is compassion. And if someone like me can do that, anybody else that's struggling can do it as well. And I say that as well as to family members, friends, colleagues, anybody out there that's struggling with somebody that might be involved in a cult, that might be involved in a gang or an extremist organization. Don't totally slam the door on that person. You know, you don't have to agree with them, obviously, you know, but don't completely slam the door on them, because if you do that, the chances of them coming back to society, coming back to civil society, are going to be slimmer, because it's going to be more difficult. They don't see any option or any way out. Sort of the old analogy, like, this is your bed, now you have to lie in it. That's something I struggled with for a long time before I made that break. And I don't want other people to stay stuck in that, you know, and have that drag down mindset, that there is hope out there. You can make a difference, and you should. So
I think that's a great message, and thank you for sharing that. All right, well, my friend, thank you so much, and someday we'll be able to talk about something that's a happy topic.
right. It was an honor being back on the program, Eric. Thanks so much for having me, and really appreciate you.